Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Career Diaries, the podcast where we bring career stories to life and share insights, advice, and inspiration you need to navigate your career journey. My name is Maureen. I will be your host as we get into conversations with hiring managers who've worked closely with students just like you. Here at the University of Leeds, we understand that your career journey can feel very uncertain, even overwhelming at times. That's why we created this podcast to showcase diverse career paths and prove that no career path is truly linear. In each episode, we'll sit down with different hiring managers who've created careers in industries such as digital innovation, creative affairs, and beyond. They will tell you their personal career stories, the tips on landing jobs, and what they look for in candidates, giving you a behind-the-scenes look of what makes your application stand out. Today, we're diving into how HELIX is shaping career and learning opportunities through innovation and inclusivity. So whether you're looking for the next opportunity or you're just starting to think about your future, this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. So stay tuned, grab a notebook, settle in, and let's get started. Hi, Kerr. It's nice to see you again.
Hello, Maureen. Nice to see you too.
So can you introduce yourself and your role at the University of Leeds?
Yeah. So my name is Kerr Hunter. I'm the Senior Community Development Manager in HELIX, which is the university's newest collaboration hub. I'll tell you a little bit more about what HELIX is later on, but generally I'm here to sort of welcome people into the space, be that students, staff or external community, but also to encourage and to sort of market ourselves to the wider community, but also create connections and create collaborations within the space as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. HELIX, I think, is a really good space and it's been the forefront of student learning. Could you give us like an overview of why it was created?
Yeah, so it was created during the pandemic, so obviously we've all lived through that.
Yeah.
It was delayed, obviously, because of that. But prior to the pandemic, there was a plan that we wanted a space where production and making activities could happen in the same space.
Yeah.
The actual HELIX itself was an iterative process. It didn't start out as it is now.
Yeah.
It grew and changed the same way that we are currently.
Yeah.
But the idea was to create a space where students and staff can have somewhere to come, hassle-free, and not have to move around campus looking for things, trying to create quite a lot of stuff in one space.
Yeah, making it
so
convenient.
So someone can come in and do quite a lot of stuff without having to leave or travel up to, I don't know, the far end of campus, then come back again to find some printing facilities, just try and get something that satisfies people in one space. Obviously we can't do everything and we don't do everything, but a lot of stuff.
Yeah, given your career path, what would you say inspired you to get involved in digital innovation?
I'm quite a free spirit, I have to say. So I don't actually plan these things necessarily. And that's probably one thing I would say about people who are looking at careers just now, is try not be too rigid and too focused. Obviously, if you are focused and you have a career plan, that is great. I'm not saying that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
I guess what I am saying is don't worry if you don't have those things. Because actually having an open mind and trying new things is never a bad thing. You might think, for example, you might go for a job, you might take a job, and it might end up being not the job for you.
Yeah.
But the things that you learn from that job and the experiences you get, whether you realise them or not, when you look back on it, you think, oh, I learned quite a lot from that. Or you learn what you don't like, which is equally as valuable as what you do like.
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, I ended up in here because an opportunity came up via the Digital Education Service, which is where I used to work, and we dotted line still report into that. I applied for the role, and with the experience I'd had with a previous project in my old role with Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women, which is around providing online education to women from emerging economies, specifically women who have not had access to education. So a lot of the time they're from Africa and Latin America, and it was providing free education for them. But part of that role was creating a community for women to come together, and that was, I think, kind of the basis of why this role was appropriate for me as well, because again, it's not online, but again, it's trying to create a community. So in the digital innovation is almost like an add-on for me, because I'm actually not a very digital person, as you may have gathered, hence the but my colleagues are, and I manage a team of people who are digitally focused, and I think that's in terms of career, whether you're starting out a career or where you're further on and you're managing people, as part of the hiring process, you are looking for people who have skills in X, Y, and Z, but you're also looking to create a team of people who complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
And not every person has to have the same skills. Not every person has to be digital.
Yeah.
You want to have a group of people who all complement each other. So as a team, you can satisfy everyone's desires and needs within a job space, wherever it might be.
Yeah. On the topic of skills, and we know that the world is becoming ever digital. There's so much innovation around like technology, and as the job market as well is evolving rapidly. What skills have you found valuable for students to have to remain competitive?
So I think being aware of, as you mentioned, things changing all the time, being sort of keeping abreast of what these changes are. Obviously, artificial intelligence is a massive thing now. You know, chat programs, behavioural learning, that's all very specific, and not everyone needs to know the ins and outs of it. But I think being able to know how to use those tools effectively and appropriately is one thing. I think your basic soft skills like team building, collaboration, presentation skills, all really valuable, because again, whether we like it or not, interviews aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So learning how to interview properly and do a presentation properly and not feel, I mean, everyone's nervous, everyone gets anxious before interview, that's completely understandable, and it's a good thing in a way, because adrenaline keeps you going and actually makes you perform better probably. But knowing how to manage those feelings in an interview and being able to prep accordingly, so doing your presentation, knowing how to fit, so for example, if you're doing a PowerPoint slide, knowing if you've got a 5-minute presentation, don't do 15 slides, because you're just going to either not get through it, run over, which isn't good for anyone, or not get a chance to finish, which means you won't get to say your... So there's a lot of things like that people really don't think about as skills, but they are really valuable skills, and that's the kind of thing that sets off an interview effectively. But on the other side of that, knowing the role. So for example, if you're going for a job interview, or applying for a job, knowing the job spec, and actually using that as thinking, the reason they're asking you about these skills that they want you to have is because these are going to be required within the job. So when you're thinking about prepping for an interview, how are you ticking off those? How am I matching that? And when you're thinking about questions, if they want someone to have the essential criteria here, they're going to ask you questions on that. So that's how you then plan. If you don't get questions in advance, that's how you then think about, well, what kind of thing are they going to ask me? Go through the essential criteria and think, well, what kind of question would be related to that? But in terms of my interviewing and taking people on, it's finding people with the correct skills that you're looking for the job. But it's, as I mentioned before, it's team fit. It's the kind of person who fits in with the rest of the people you have on a team, and people who are willing to learn. I think that's one of the key things, open-mindedness, as I mentioned before. People who are aware that they maybe don't know everything, and that's fine. No one expects everyone to be 100% ready for a job. Jobs are there for people to grow into them. All you need to have is the basic skills in specific areas that you need, the requirements, for then that person to come in and learn from other people. Everyone's learning all the time. We're all learning all the time.
Yeah, also, apart from the skills that you mentioned, is there a particular one that you really want to find in a student when you're hiring, interviewing?
So in this space, it's difficult because I haven't really mentioned the full breadth of what HELIX is, but I know you know. But we have so many different zones in the space, covering from 3D printing, laser cutting in the maker space, to immersive technologies, VR in the immersive technology space. You know, where we are today in the studio, we've got cameras, lighting. One person, and I'm aware of this when we employ student interns or, you know, staff members. One person generally doesn't have all of those things. So it really does depend on which job someone is going for. But I guess to answer your question in a kind of a one skill thing, I guess it would be probably people skills, actually. Because this space, as you know, is a thoroughfare of people from all, you know, staff, students. We have people coming in from other universities. We've got dignitaries coming in from China, you know, over visiting faculties. A real mix of people all the time. And so you don't need to be a you don't need to be a showy person. But someone who's comfortable enough to speak to people from all different levels, all different countries. A really open-minded person who's willing to talk. And in a way, present, because we're in HELIX, we're still trying to make sure that people know who we are and what we do, and that kind of outgoing person, I guess, is something I would look for.
Definitely. I read that HELIX is aiming to create a very inclusive and equal space where all students, staff members are able to benefit from it. What, in your team in particular, what kinds of projects have you done, or what initiatives have you made to ensure that the space is inclusive for everyone?
So it's something that's really close to my heart. I do a lot of stuff, both within my role, but also outside my role, around equity, diversity and inclusion. I'm a school governor for primary school for equity, EDI.
Oh, wow.
I'm on the committee for addressing antisocial behaviour and bullying. I'm on the Racial Equality Charter Committee. I'm on the EDI committee more widely. I'm running a community of practice, which is just kicking off just now around EDI. So there's a lot of stuff I do outside my role. And because I do those things, I'm now trying to implement that within my role. One of the key things that we're hoping to do, and we are doing, is working with the external community. Because even though I mentioned, obviously, we're students and staff focused, we are hoping to serve the wider Leeds community generally, within reason, as much as we can. Obviously, student education comes first. But we've already done stuff with Asylum Seekers Network, who've used our recording studios to do a podcast. We've worked with a connected Leeds City Museum and University of Leeds project, which came through an academic member of staff, and it was actually giving voice to people who didn't identify with the gender they were born into. So again, they get to tell their story, but because it was on microphone, not on camera, you can say what you need to say without being seen, so that you're not identifiable. Again, giving people the opportunity to use a space like this and feel like there's no barriers to it, and there isn't any barriers to it. The only thing we have to work around in those situations is they're not at university, they don't necessarily work 9 to 5, and we open evenings, we open a weekend, and in that situation we opened an extra Saturday for them to come in and do that. So we're quite flexible in how we do that. But in terms of the space physically, we have just gained some more funding to actually enhance the space further for accessibility. So again, to make ourselds more easily accessed for people in wheelchairs, for example. Adjusting sound, we did sound panelling in the room because people who have hearing aids or more hard of hearing weren't hearing things properly. So we're just consistently trying to make changes to make sure that every person feels as welcome as they can.
I didn't expect it to get better than this, honestly.
Well, you never know. It could be that we are constantly trying to make sure that EDI, accessibility, diversity, is all really part and parcel with how we operate in HELIX.
And as you said, that HELIX is more student and staff focused, and even though you work with external communities, you direct most of your resources to students. So what would you tell a student who is from an underrepresented background or identifies a certain way that isn't coherent with what everyone else is believing? What advice would you give them to maximize the resources offered in HELIX and the university at large, and still be able to remain competitive and be able to access all these facilities?
I think one of the key things I would say, depending on where the person is, if the person was on or in Leeds, I would ask them to come in to the space. Because one of the biggest things I think people have generally, but also in a HELIX, because people are now getting more familiar with the space, but before, when we just opened, people didn't really understand what HELIX was. And one of the easiest ways to figure out what it is to actually come in and see it. Whether that's through a guided tour that myself or one of my colleagues would do, or joining one of our sessions. We run sessions on 3D printing, or on podcasting, on laser cutting, on virtual reality. Everything is free in HELIX. So you could come along to one of those sessions, or you could come in and see us. And hopefully that first interaction, I would hope and I would want that person to feel like, oh, it's actually, I can come in. It was quite easy. We're not actually that easy to find. But once you find us, once you come in, everything's really easy, really simple. Very open plan, open access. There's no barriers. You don't need cards for anything unless it's, behind doors, which you need inductions for. So I would hope coming in, you would get a really welcoming reception. I would hope that when we showed you the space, you would realise that actually it's relatively easy to use, and if it's not, there's always someone on hand to come and help you set something up. And as I mentioned, it's free to use, so hopefully there'll be no barrier in terms of they don't have to pay anything to use us. And hopefully just being in the space, you meet other people in here. So we've got innovation partners who I think we'll probably talk about shortly, who are interns. Not all of them are always here, but there's always someone around, one of them around. There's us as well. We're obviously all mostly always here, so we would be here to help and make sure people feel welcome, and any problems, we'll answer any questions for anyone. And hopefully, I think the HELIX ethos is and should be sort of translating across university. I think obviously if anyone's been to HELIX before, you'll know we're part of a 1960s AC Stoner brutalist architecture building. Obviously we're limited with what we can do with the fabric of the building, but what we have done I think is really amazing in making it trying to make it as inclusive and open a space as possible. And I think the idea of how HELIX is manifested can actually be translated into other buildings across the university. And I think generally, I would say that the University of Leeds staff and student body are relatively welcoming people. So hopefully someone in that situation would, coming in here, hopefully have the same experience in here as they would do at other parts of the university as well.
Cool. Now onto the internships. You mentioned that you guys hire student interns, so could you give us a brief overview of what those roles are?
Yes. So we currently have 8 internships. 5 are HELIX funded. 3 are funded through the Career Service.
Okay.
The roles are really varied. So when we talked before around interviews and what skills, when I mentioned it's really hard because obviously all the spaces in HELIX are so different. And that's why we have so many interns, because actually, as I mentioned, it's very hard to find one person who could cover all of the skills that HELIX desires. Whereas we have 5 innovation partners who are actually based in HELIX. They have a variety of skills, and their role really is to be on site to help us help people like you, like other students, other staff members, external community people, just get familiar with what they need to do. So if you've come in and you say, I want to do some filming, no one expects you to know how to set up all our cameras and lights. But if you come in and you get shown how to do it, then that's learning for you. It's learning for me, when I need to do something. And when someone else comes in, an innovation partner who has learned by coming in and learning from someone else, can then share their skills with someone. So the 5 key ones that we have on campus the majority of the time are here really to service the space and make sure people know how to use things. They run inductions and they help people set up. We've got 3 additional innovation partners who are run through the Career Service or paid through the Career Service, and they're more project driven, and we've given them a series of projects that they can do, and the reason they're differentiated from the others is because they don't actually have to be here. A lot of the time they work from home because it's just project based. They do come in, and they're obviously more than welcome to be here, but they're more ad hoc as whether they're here or not. And some of the projects they're doing are around horizon scanning, so that's looking beyond HELIX and the University of Leeds and actually seeing what does the University of Sheffield do, what does the University of Manchester do, what does King's College London do, what does Harvard do, beyond our small locality, and actually comparing and contrasting. Maybe they don't have a HELIX, but maybe they've got something like a makerspace, maybe they've got a robotics institute, maybe they've got an immersive technology space as well, maybe they've got all of these things together, but it's not the same as HELIX. So it's doing a compare and contrast of who we are, what we are, who else is doing these things. And it's not about competition, it's about making sure if someone's doing something else, well, that's maybe a collaboration opportunity. Or if someone's doing something, we hadn't thought of that, that's a good thing to try and explore for when we're thinking about developments in HELIX. So it's about making sure you remain competitive. And another big one that we're looking to do is around case studies. So one of the key things to highlight, I think, is that we do so much good work in here, but a lot of the time people don't, as we've mentioned already, it's hard to let everyone know that we exist, but also about what we do. And I mentioned I'll be bringing people in, but case studies are a really useful way for us to show how an individual has effectively used either the hardware, software, or just the space in HELIX. And all of our innovation partners, the 3 that work remotely, are looking at case studies and interviewing people to ask them to give us their feedback and their well, their experience actually
Yeah.
of how they've used the space effectively.
Can you share an example of like either a student or an innovation partner who's benefited from HELIX resources, either be the makerspace, 3D printing, podcasting?
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
We had a person who came down last year, and they were a fine art student, and they did their full fine art installation, which was to show their degree show in HELIX, and it was all laser cut, and they literally spent days and days in here just laser cutting all of the installation. And then we went up to see the final show summertime last year, and there it was in all its glory, and it was the game that was, if I remember correctly, the game that could never be won. And it was basically, as you can imagine, it was a series of laser cut objects, but they didn't fit together, and you couldn't, and that idea was to try and solve this puzzle, and you couldn't solve it because it could never be won. And that's just an example of how a student used our resources so effectively, because it actually took them to their degree, and that was their final year project.
Yeah, okay. So if a student or anyone wants to get into digital innovation and like future-proof their career, where would they start, or what things should they consider to thrive in this field?
I would say as I mentioned before, I would say definitely keep abreast of the kind of what's happening in not even the industry. I think for all of us, you know, what's happening around us. Digital stuff is going everywhere. And find your niche, I think, as well, because as I mentioned for here, no one expects any individual to be able to do everything. Find something you're interested in. So say, for example, it is large language models. Get familiar with what's out there. Look at ChatGPT, look at Copilot, look at DeepSeek. You know the problems and know how to effectively use them. We run sessions, not in HELIX, but the Digital Education Service have been part of running sessions around prompts. And one of the key things with large language models and ChatGPT and Copilot, for example, I don't know if you've ever used them, but sometimes you have to.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to kind of go through like several. So you ask it something, for example, and then you get an answer that's not really what I wanted to hear, which is how these things work. But actually, if you are more specific and if you use the correct prompts, the chances are it's going to give you what you need more quickly. And there's a skill in that, because creating the correct prompts is actually the whole training field around how to create the correct prompts. So that kind of thing. So for example, if you were a person that's interested in artificial intelligence and large language models and ChatGPT and conversational tools, having done some form of training or knowing how to give correct prompts, it's a real skill, because a lot of people don't know how to do it. And if you're using ChatGPT, for example, as a tool to work with, no one wants to waste time at work. These tools are meant to be intended to save you time. So if you can save yourself time using the tool that saves you time, all the better.
Definitely. Okay, so, and we know that HELIX is a great space and it's all student-centered. How can students connect with HELIX more and start making more use of the resources? I know you mentioned that all they have to do is just come and see how easy it is to be in here. But like otherwise, is there any other additional support like the people in HELIX provide to make sure it's as accessible as possible?
I mentioned the sort of training things that we do, all free. It's all on Eventbrite. But also we do regular showcases, and we do put that out to students and staff. So we will look to do one in springtime, so maybe March or April. And what they are is an open invite. Basically, we just open. I mean, HELIX is always open anyway, but we sort of curate a series of things in all the spaces, so people can come in and not just see the space, and not just by chance maybe see someone doing something. We actually put something on in all the space so people can see the space working effectively. And again, that's one of the key, and it's not a challenge, well, it is a challenge, I suppose, it's a challenge we work with, is that people don't necessarily know what HELIX is and how it works until you come in, which is why I was saying it's really useful people come in. But it's even better when people come in and there's actually something appropriate happening in each space, which is what these events are called. So normally we call them a showcase. So if you're ever looking at your emails and you see something around a HELIX showcase, it'll be that. So it's an open invite, you come in. Normally we've got, cakes on the go, and people can come in and have a really relaxed sort of wander around and speak to students and staff members who've actually used the space, and they'll be doing something in a space. For example, in the maker space, someone will be using sewing machines and creating something, or they'll
Yeah.
have Lego series play out and showing how they can use that to teach with or to do a project. Or there'll be someone in the 3D printing room with the door open doing 3D prints to show how, once you've had the training, it's really simple and you can just come
Yeah.
in and you set your print off. And similarly, in all other spaces, we would have something happening. And that's a really good way to show people how we work and
Yeah.
hopefully how easy it is.
Just leave the doors open.
Just leave the doors open and come
Yeah.
in and just speak to people. And that's one of the key things we want to do in here. It's all about conversation and collaboration. And as I said before, not everyone in the world is friendly. Like, I'm not naive enough to
Yeah.
know that. But generally, people in HELIX are aware of, once you're in here and you start to use the space, you're kind of aware of how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think someone who comes into HELIX and gets asked a question, that's not unexpected. Because
Mhm.
people want to know how things work, or people want to know how to get upstairs because it's really a difficult building to...
There's an upstairs.
Not for HELIX, but I
Yeah.
just mean generally.
Okay.
People will ask questions of other people because they just are curious or they're looking for things, and that's a great thing about the space, because it connects people. Because initially, as soon as you have that initial conversation, then you're not friends, but then you recognise
Mhm.
someone, and then you might talk to them again. And then you might ask them about something they're doing. Why are they here? And then you could
Yeah.
figure out, oh, actually they're doing something similar to you. And it's all these really, really loose connections that I think are really helpful in a space like this, because it's so open and so sort of free-flowing and
Mhm.
non-hierarchical. I mean, you could be sat next to anyone in here and you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But if you have the conversation, then you get to find out more about someone.
Yeah. In terms of the challenges HELIX faces, or even your own student interns or your team, what are those challenges and how have you tried to address them?
One of the key challenges I think we've mentioned, which is raising awareness of the space, because I genuinely think every single student could benefit from using HELIX in some way.
Yeah.
But we're never going to get to every student. I mean, it's impossible,
Yeah.
because you just can't. And also, not every student is on campus, and that is a limitation, because obviously we can do things remotely.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's hard to try and facilitate something with someone who doesn't know we exist, and if they're not even here, it's probably even less likely that they know that we exist. So that's a challenge, and I guess we're trying to just do continued promotion. We use Instagram, we use LinkedIn, we use student communications, we use our website. But as I say, we're never going to get to everyone. And we're obviously restricted in terms of budget, so we can't do all the things we would love to do because we don't have the money to do that. So, we could arguably have massive paid Instagram campaigns going out to international audiences, but arguably it's not relevant for a lot of the people it would hit. And then if it did hit the right people, how do we then engage them, and what activities do we do with the limited resources we've got with people who are here? So it is a challenge. And the other challenge we have, which is space.
Yeah.
We're not massive, and we're getting increasingly busy, which is great.
Yeah.
But that then means that not everyone can do what they need to do.
Yeah, but of course there are plans in place to
There
increase
are
the space.
Yeah, plans in place for HELIX. We're calling it HELIX 2. We don't actually know if that's what it'll be called. But and we don't actually know what that looks like yet. It is very much in the scoping space just now.
Okay.
And I guess what I can say is what we're looking to do is to evaluate and measure how effective the spaces within the current HELIX that we're in right now has been, and using student feedback, staff feedback, evaluation of who's in the space, how often, we can then say, well, this space is really popular, this space is really popular, we need to make more of these spaces. And then that's how HELIX 2 will form, whether that's another HELIX like this, or whether it's like satellite HELIXes across campus, who knows. But there's a drive for more.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Well, I'm done grilling you for now.
Well, it's lovely to be grilled.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I hope that the students who are listening to this will find this very insightful and useful and apply it in their own career journeys and just their everyday day-to life.
Yeah. Well, can I just say a quick comment on that?
Yeah, definitely.
For any student who is watching, as we've mentioned, we're not that easy to find. But if you just type in HELIX, Leeds University, you will get our web presence, and you'll find directions to us. There's also a what 3 words in there too. So once you find us, you'll never leave, hopefully. So.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Career Diaries. I hope you found this conversation insightful and it's given you a fresh perspective on your own career journey. Remember, no path is truly linear, and every experience, big or small, helps shape where you're headed. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to follow Career Diaries on Spotify and on YouTube. And if you really enjoyed it, you can share it with a friend who may need a little bit of career inspiration. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring new career possibilities. Stay tuned for more career insights right here on Career Diaries.